All right, guys, this is Mindset Mike, and I'm back today with one of the most dynamic competitors in the sport of wrestling right now. 2016 Olympic bronze medalist, 2018 world champion, a three-time NCAA champion. On the mat, he's definitely a force to be reckoned with, and I think off the mat, known for his charismatic personality and some interesting talents that he possesses that very few wrestlers do. We'll talk about his childhood. We'll talk about his wrestling at Mizzou, how he's bounced back for some difficult times in his life, and his past few years on the senior level. Today, everybody, let's give a warm welcome to Jaden Cox. Thank you for coming on, Jaden. I appreciate your time.
No, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, for sure. So, first of all, Jaden, I want to welcome you with a big congratulations on a great performance at Worlds. You battled through a lot to get there, and then in the tournament, you suffered injury and were able to push through that. It seems like apparently that's a recurring thing for you now. You can't do anything great without getting injured, it seems. So, can you tell us about your training leading up to the World Championships and your experience in Budapest?
Well, the training was great. I made a move from Columbia, Missouri to the Springs in Colorado, and Kevin Jackson took me under his wing and was working with me every day. They got me set with a weightlifting plan, got me set just working with him. We just focused on things that we weren't really good at, for one, and then we looked to improve on areas even more so that I'd already had a lot of success in. Changing our mindsets in certain situations of the match that we were, more likely going to see. It was just an awesome transition, and KJ definitely helped me a lot with that. And, a lot of the guys here who are in the EAP program, they helped me out a lot, being my partners. And it was just awesome. It was like being on a team here at the OTC. So,
what's the EAP program for those that don't know?
So the EAP program is for developmental wrestlers, basically guys who are in high school still or making that transition from high school to college. It's basically a program they get to come out here, live out here, and train with one of the best coaches out there with KJ and Bill Zadek, and get more international experience younger. Some of them may still go to college. Some of them may gray shirt, but it's a great way for guys to go out there and get really tough competition, get exposed to the international scene early, and get great training and prepare themselves for the next step, which is college wrestling, and then have them already had a little taste of international wrestling if they're ready to take that step after that.
For sure. Before we get into a little bit more about you had mentioned here in your talk about Budapest that you and KJ had worked to change mindsets in certain situations. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about that? Like, what were the situations? What was the mindset shift, and how did you accomplish that?
Well, I think first, like the broad thing was just believing in your ability, believing in what you're capable of, not belittling your talents. KJ did a really good job of the reassurance, because I tend to sometimes, I try to stay as humble as I can, but sometimes when I'm doing that, what I'm doing is I'm putting down my ability, or I'm not giving myself enough credit. But being able to then say that I am capable of doing what I do, I can go out there and I can do this, and I'm going to go out there and do this, and having that confidence behind it. KJ did a great job of reassuring me that you're capable of doing a lot and a lot more things, and you can go out there and do your best, and put your best foot forward. I think also, like, certain situations where, like, instead of getting ones, let's get twos. Instead of pushing a guy out, let's get the takedown, and just working those positions. And I think a big thing too we did was conditioning. We conditioned myself, and that's another thing he had to reassure me on, because sometimes I think a big thing, like, people don't understand how much a mindset really plays into the physical part of it, right? Because if you believe you're tired, you'll react that way. Your body will follow what your mind says. So I mean, it's kind of like everything that I had to go through and that KJ was putting me through. He was trying to kind of just help me either change my view on things or help me push myself to the next level.
Absolutely. And I think it's such a true thing that you said too, even about cardio. cardio can be similar to mindset. Your Achilles heel, or it could be one of your strengths, and you can use it as a weapon. I think, those of you that are listening, you can think of some wrestlers even at the collegiate level where, cardio is probably their best weapon. If you look at some of the guys that won world championships or that succeeded on the American team this past world championships, cardio and pace played a big role in that. I think some of the international guys breaking down their lack of cardio or lack of ability to deal with being tired was a contributor to their success or failure. So I think that's a very good point. I'm glad that you mentioned that. So when it comes to you, let's talk about your early days. You came to Mizzou as, correct me if I'm wrong, a 4-time state high school champion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Talk to me about how you got started wrestling in your high school career. Talk to me about what that was like.
Well, I mean, I got started wrestling really young. I mean, my uncle did it, and then my brothers did it, and I talked to my parents, and I was like, I want to do it. So I was kind of around it all the time. And, coming up through high school, I think one of the biggest things was, I have to say, like Mike Ironman, he was a great coach. He took me under his wing when I was 9, and has been coaching me since then, basically. He's still a part of my life. We still talk, we still chat. I mean, a lot. I just love having that guy as a part of my life. And I mean, like, he took me under his wing. And one thing he taught me was that I think is really important for a lot of young wrestlers is how to be coachable, and how to take a style from any person or anything that you learn from anyone and make it your own. And so that made it a lot easier for me to transition from, kids club to high school onto college, and so on and so forth.
So kind of like, when you say taking someone's style, you mean watching other people wrestle and make that your own?
Yeah. Like, I think that people have very different ways of doing things. And even though we do things similarly, I mean, I think that we don't do it exactly the same. How someone else does something may not be the same that you do something. And you may tweak it. You got to find a way to make it your own style, whether it be the way you set it up, whether it be the way you perform it. I mean, that's what makes wrestling such a great sport. I think there's really not a wrong answer. I believe any move, there's a time and a place for it. You just have to figure out where it fits in, and when to hit it. So I think that makes the sport awesome. So I think you got to figure out how to make things your own.
Absolutely. We have a couple different worksheets. We talk about aggressiveness role models, toughness role models, technique role models. That goes directly in what you're saying, taking someone's style, not just, the technique that they do, but the style of wrestling and the mentality that they have, and making it your own. Who were some people that throughout your wrestling career you took from their style and incorporated that into who Jaden Cox is?
Well, a big one is, I don't know if you know this, but like a lot of people kind of talk about my movement and stuff, and movement in my feet. A lot of that came from, believe it or not, didn't come from a wrestler. It came from Muhammad Ali. That was someone that I watched YouTube videos of. I watched an autobiography about it, So, I mean, I was watching a lot of videos about him. So he really inspired me as far as, like, you can be a big guy, still be quick and agile. And then I remember in high school, I would walk on my toes a lot. I would jump rope all the time. And then I would try to incorporate, the movement of my feet and these movements into my wrestling. So that was one of the biggest ones. Was actually Muhammad Ali definitely inspired me as far as that went, because he's a heavyweight moving like, like one of the smaller guys in boxing. And I was like, well, we can do that here. And so I try to incorporate that.
That's funny. I remember at the Monterey Clinic when you were giving your technique breakdowns, and you were talking about how, finish my sentence here because I don't remember exactly what you said. You were talking about, because you spent so much time walking and wrestling on your toes, you said you can essentially like cut down the amount of time that it takes you to take a shot, or the explosiveness is greater, something along those lines, that something that you did in order to condition your body to always be on your toes allows you essentially to be the way that you are offensively. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So like I did all that movement. So it takes away, when I shoot, it takes away the kind of like the rocking back and forth motion, not going from my heels to my toes, just being on my toes and then going right into my shot. On top of that, I believe that I'm also at the same time, while I'm ready to be offensive, I'm also then prepared and ready to be defensive as well. So I can shoot my legs back. It's very hard to sprawl when you're on your heels. So I'm ready for both. And, it's just something that allows me to be prepared for every situation in wrestling. And I move quicker. I'm always loaded and ready to go. I'm always having power within my legs and ready to explode when I need to, whether it be for an offensive motion, defensive motion, to move quick, to do whatever it is I have to do. So it always prepares me to be in the position I need to be in, to be explosive, powerful, and just ready to go.
Footwork is definitely very overlooked, and that's something that I, as a club coach, I try to focus on a lot this last year. I traveled so much the last 2 years with Wrestling Mindset. I was in a lot of great rooms with a lot of great coaches, and something that I saw in common in all of the best rooms with the best coaches, they had a very specific attention to footwork. And I feel like if you can, this generation, while we have a lot of athletes, we have a lot of people that are trying to wrestle and learn these athletic movements, but they can't move athletically. They can't move athletically yet. Their hands and their feet don't work in coordination fast enough to be able to, and their body doesn't work in coordination. Their core strength isn't there to be able to accomplish some of these like very athletic movements versus you see, these big Russians, they're moving like little guys, or like your example, Muhammad Ali, moving like little guys, and a lot of that comes back to footwork and the athleticism that they develop. So super cool. I hope you guys that are listening paid attention to that and took some notes. It's funny that you immediately mentioned Mike Ironman. That was my next question. Was anyone that knows you knows that Mike Ironman played a big part in your life. And I saw and I heard some things, funny things about, I guess, your career and relationship together. One of the things, like when you started wrestling, you lost 7 matches in a row. One time he actually pulled you from a tournament because you broke in a match, and you felt like, whether it was you or your coaches, you readjusted your approach to wrestling. He sat you and he made you drill and wrestle right in front of him for the rest of that summer or the year. And that was when you guys felt like you made a very big transition and jumped levels. So what I'd like you to do is talk a little bit about like what Mike has done for you in your life, what he means to you as a coach, and more, what he's done for your mindset, and maybe even talk a little bit about Jaden and your all of y'all's relationship together.
Well, I think one thing is that both of them are crazy. They're both crazy, and I love them for it. Mike has been a huge part of my life, both on and off the mat. I think on the mat, he's just a ninja, man. He knows the ins and outs, both mentally and physically. I mean, I think Mike has experienced a lot with his wrestling career as well, both mentally and physically. I mean, he's someone who can inform you of what you're thinking before you even think about it, or what's going to happen before it happens. He kind of can just has the ins and outs about it. A big thing that he does that I really enjoyed, especially as a kid, was he would talk to us, before practice. Practice is about to start in like 30 minutes or so, and he's sitting there just talking to us, and then it runs into practice, and he's talking to us about matches and mindsets, and not like preaching, but like having a conversation with us about it. He'd have us do things like sit in a split for minutes, a couple minutes before practice, and just sit there and then try to go lower and lower. I mean, we don't understand it. We're kids. We don't understand why. But then later on, guys get into our legs and we're going to that position and realize, oh, there's a purpose. And, I think with everything Mike was teaching us or telling us or having us do, there was a purpose behind it. It wasn't just, and it wasn't all about working out. It wasn't all about the grind. It was about becoming an all-around better wrestler. And, we didn't have to run sprints all the time, or we didn't have to grind our bodies into the ground. We just learned how to wrestle, and how to have a wrestling mindset, and not really even a wrestling mindset, just a mindset to go out there and enjoy it, to put on a show and enjoy what we do, and look to dominate and enjoy that domination. Look forward to the match, not being in there scared, because the next match is about to end in a minute and you're waiting, but stand there excited and pumped and be ready to to place your foot on the line.
like I said, I've spent a lot of time traveling in the last 2 years, and I've done it with very open and observant eyes and ears, trying to figure out what do all these great coaches have in common, and these great athletes and the coaches that built them, what do they have in common? And the stuff that you're saying is very reminiscent to when I spent a week with the Sanderson family in Utah. Kyler became a good friend of mine this past year, and him and Brad Pataki, I learned a lot from them, a lot more than just wrestling, but about how they are as human beings and coaches. And something that I learned that Kale's dad did for everybody is, like you were saying, they were, you should be excited to wrestle. You should enjoy that. It shouldn't be a nerve-wracking thing. You should go out there and perform. Well, they were saying, Kale's dad, they never called it a tournament. It was a performance. Practice was always a rehearsal. And when they're going out there, like, hey guys, it's, we're time. It's the exciting time of the week where we get to perform for our parents and showcase everything that we've been working about. It was always about performance and excitement rather than nerves and pressure. And I think that's this generation of coaches, we can learn that from, these other great figures, but these were guys that, for lack of better explanation, came up with it themselves. This is what their focus was on. And look at the athletes that have come out of their programs. Obviously guys like you and Jaden, and then so many other athletes that he's built. And then the Sanderson family, the boys, and then, the team in Heber that was ranked top 10 twice, all of those great clubs. So anyways, I hope that you guys that are listening, you've probably heard the podcast that I did with Kyler, and you've heard the things that I've talked about with regards to how these great families and great clubs handle themselves. So if you're not already applying this thought process, I hope, this is another incentive for you to do so. So now talk about Mizzou. We talked about your career coming up. Now, what about at Mizzou? Those 3 national titles. We'll save the year that you didn't win for after, but 3 national titles, great performances. What did it take for you to mentally compete at such a high level for so long? And how do you feel like your experience at Mizzou prepared you now for the senior level?
Well, I've always had one thing I've been blessed with is coaches who've always pushed me to reach my peak or my potential, my full potential, or as close to it as possible. Coming through, high school, I had that with J.D. Coffin and Ben Smith. Guys just wanted to push me so far. Like they were bringing in guys who are already done with college or just out of college to wrestle with me. And then getting into Mizzou, you're in a room full of great talent. You have no choice but to grow and thrive. You don't have a choice really. It's going to happen as long as you stick with it and you're committed to doing the right things and being a part of that program. So I think actually my freshman year I had Sammy Henson, and we talked about taking things from coaches and different wrestlers. Well, I think Henson installed a sort of toughness that within me that maybe I didn't have before. I think that was something that I took away from him because, like I said, when we talk about Mike's training, like I said, we weren't running sprints, we weren't grinding, we were just learning how to become wrestlers. And I had that part when I was going into college, and I've been growing with Mike for so long. So then when I got transitioned over, and Henson's is my coach as far as in the room, he then installed the grind. You're running sprints and you're lifting weights for sets of 90. You're doing the mile runs as hard as you can, the 7-mile runs, and you're pushing yourself. You're doing the stadiums and everything, and not only doing them because those things were tradition for Mizzou to do, but doing them and trying to dominate that workout and get that toughness to push through it. And so I think Henson definitely helped to install that, and that's something I learned and took with me as well. Smith led the program. It was a great program. Both, I think, as a man and as a wrestler, he definitely helped to focus on both. As a man, as a wrestler, as a student, making sure that you represented yourself well in every aspect of life, and talking with guys and helping guys reach their goals both on and off the mat.
For sure. You finished your freshman campaign as a national champ. but in your documentary, you talked about how you battled demons and dark times during that time. You talked about, correct me if I'm wrong, the difference between joy and happiness and how people need to know that difference. Can you tell us, kind of share that experience for those that didn't get to watch that, the great documentary that Flo did on you, kind of share that experience, what you battled through, and, in the midst of seemingly, having everything at your fingertips, at least that's what everybody on the outside saw. Everybody else saw the happy, cheerful, freshman national champion. What was going on in your life, and how did you bounce back from what you would call really dark times and struggling with demons?
Well, if I'm honest, bouncing back is the way you have to put it, because dark times still linger within my life. They don't just disappear, and it's something that I'm trying to definitely overcome. But I think that before, so my freshman year, it was actually just before my freshman year. So I think it was about a month before, maybe just a couple of weeks before the season had actually kicked off. I actually ended up being put into the psych ward at MU, and it was something. No, it was it's definitely an experience I would love not to have, but I was in there, and I remember Smith visiting me, and I had some other people visit me, and I remember that the coaches and the staff kind of just rallied around me, and honestly I didn't know this till later on, but some of my teammates kind of understood and knew what was going on as well, and now that I know that, it makes more sense that they kind of helped me overcome my demons as well, and just kind of had my back through some tough times, for sure. Bouncing back was more so. I remember when I came back to the team and I came back from there, I wanted so badly just to wrestle and get on the mat. But I think at the same time, and really, when I know we're going to get into this later, but considering my sophomore year, I was really just I wanted to get on the mat, because I think wrestling was just my way of burying what was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's something I'm still working on, still learning, that that's not necessarily a healthy thing to do. And it's something that, but it's hard, because especially whenever you've been doing it for so long, it's a lesson that, it's hard to overcome that, because you've been doing it for so long, and it's like a habit almost, and you want to, and you try to, and at some points it works in your life, and you think, I can get over this, and I can work through this on my own. And then finally, at some point, it breaks down, and then it breaks you, and then all of a sudden, there's really just a shell of yourself, and then you make decisions and you do things that aren't really you, or what you really want, or have your best intentions, but yet they feel like they're the right thing for you to do. And
So I think a lot of, I'm sorry to interrupt. I wanted to make a point that I think a lot of wrestlers, we're a prideful group. We are. It's all about never showing weakness. And what would you say to help wrestlers that maybe do struggle with dark times and depression, suicidal thoughts, or just going through really difficult times in general, and being conditioned to not show weakness and ask for help? How would you say, as in the situation that you found yourself in and that you continue to battle with, what's your advice to those of us stubborn wrestlers who never want to show that we're tired or weak, to do the important thing and take care of their mental health?
Well, see, that's even hard for me to answer, because that's still something I try to figure out every day. I just learned the other night that I think the other night from someone that vulnerability sometimes is stronger than trying to keep everything in, and trying to quote unquote be strong when really you're just hurting yourself. So I think it's really, it comes down to who do you trust, and trusting someone that you can open up to and be honest with, and being vulnerable in that moment. And I think it's even more important for someone that, if someone does initiate that, to approach that with open arms, and listen. And I think that's a big thing. I know for me at the time when I moved in with Mike actually after that incident, and I think that was a big thing. He just listened to me speak and just talked about things. And I also I got in to see a therapist as well, and did the same thing there, and really, and that's where I really got to dig into my into what was going on, and help with some situations. And like I said, I'm still dealing with a lot of things. So I mean, I don't have all the answers, but I do think that's one.
So just being able to be, having someone at the very least to open up to, and it's better to be vulnerable than to hold stuff in. I think, as in myself, advice that I've given, or ways that I've described to people, I feel like this is related but unrelated. I relate, like, when you want to talk about love in a relationship, whatever it may be, love is being completely vulnerable to another person, but trusting them to not hurt you. And I think there's strength in that, and there's something to be said when it comes to a situation like this, where there is more power in vulnerability than there is in stubbornness and keeping things in. So I appreciate you opening up about that. I know wrestlers are a group of people that have a lot of things that they struggle with. Everybody does, but I would say wrestlers is a unique group, and we're probably among the more stubborn athletes that don't want to show the weakness, and it's important to do that before it could be too late. So like I said, I do appreciate you opening up about that. Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Now the next year you took fifth after you lost to Snyder in the semis, and you said, and I quote, you did everything wrong that year, and that was your proof that you did everything wrong. What did you mean by that, and what changed? Because obviously you came back and won 2 national titles, made an Olympic team, placed in the Olympics, placed in the World Championships. Clearly you made some changes. What was wrong and what changed?
Well, like I said before, I think that I was using wrestling in the wrong way. I think, and this is like, and maybe I wasn't thinking about it at the time or nothing, but like looking back on it, like I said, I was trying to bury a lot of things, and I was just not doing things right with my life. I was living my life wrong off the mat, and I'm a big advocate for like how you live your life off the mat is going to affect you on it. That's something I've learned since I was young, and so I mean, and I think that year was a great attest to that. I think those 2 years for my sophomore and junior year are big points where that's proof of that. But I just lived my life completely wrong. I did things bad, as a person, as a man, as a student. Just nothing was done. And even if things weren't done wrong, they weren't done to my full potential or to my full efforts.
For sure.
So I mean, I just and I did things like I took shortcuts, and I took shortcuts, so I did things wrong, and then I lived my life wrong, and so then that caused me to take shortcuts in my training. And since I took shortcuts in my training, I would look to take shortcuts in matches, and then I took shortcuts in matches, and then I started and I went undefeated, and everybody thought everything was great because I was going undefeated through the regular season. But I think even myself, even though I didn't want to believe it, or I didn't believe it, I still, like, a part of me knew that it was only a matter of time before it caught up to me. And, then I ended up wrestling Kyle Snyder in the semis. Still, I didn't wrestle my best in that match. It still was a good match. It was a close match. And then, but still you lose. And then I remember being on my knees actually in NCAAs. And I didn't want to believe it so much that, I remember I went back in the back and I had to wrestle McIntosh next. And I seriously didn't even want to be on the mat at that point in time. And then I ended up dropping that match to McIntosh to decide whether or not I'm going to go for third or fifth. And then I remember talking with the coaches, and it's just like you want to end this on a high note. Finish this tournament out to what you want it to be. And then I struggled, and then in a match of which I struggled in, I finally came back to beat then Connor Hartman for fifth. And then past that, I remember I went back and I talked to my coaches, and we said we had to make some changes. And I had this, man. I came into them and I talked to them, like, I got to make some changes because I did not want to feel like that again. Or that feeling of almost being like lost, and and not even shocked at the results, but like I don't want to feel that where like I knew especially because it's one way when you feel like, oh, I knew I was, like when I said at Worlds, I expected to be here. I did the work to here. It was almost like I expected to be there and I was in denial about it.
Yeah.
Where I was on the wrong end. And so I went back and I talked with them, and, I said, I want to make some changes. This is what I want to do. Here's how I want to commit to it. And this is where I want to go for next year. And then next year, it was like you saw a completely different person on the mat. And I think even off the mat as well, I think people saw a different person. You saw someone who was very confident, who was walking out there and knew that I could do whatever I wanted to do. I could go as far as I needed to go and do everything I needed to do. And off the mat, I was putting my full efforts towards everything as a person, as a student, whatever it is I need to do. I was doing what I had to do to become the best at whatever it is I was doing and put my best foot forward. And there were days I struggled. Don't think every day was easy. I mean, it was a reminder every day. I had to remind myself that, what I was aiming for, what the goal was and what I wanted. I remember I was speaking into truth everything that I wanted. So I remember I would say to myself, this is what I want. This is what I'm going to do. This is where I'm going to be. And
that's some law of attraction stuff right there.
Basically, I was just like trying to put everything out there and I'm saying it and believe in it and put my full effort in it.
So we say a lot of the time, people say fake it till you make it. Really, it's fake it till you feel it. So whether it's based on like what you were saying, speak it into existence. For those of you, if you want to act confident, you need to look confident, because how you look is going to influence the way that you feel. So like you said, coming out there, looking and acting differently, being able to speak those things into existence, everything plays a role. So I hope, again, those of you that are listening are thinking about how this relates to your own life and, how you're not alone and how you feel in these sort of situations. And even guys at the highest level, even guys that you would never think struggle with these sort of things, everybody struggles. One of the last questions I'm going to ask Jaden has to do with, exactly that. People think that once you get to these national championship, world championship levels, that nerves and confidence and being able to relax under pressure just dissipates. It's not. The hero and the coward feel the exact same thing. The difference is how you actually deal with it. So those are all great points. Jaden, in 2016, you qualified for the Olympics by beating David Taylor in the finals amidst injury. I heard somewhere that you originally didn't even want to compete in the Olympic trials, but somebody convinced you and you agreed to do it under some certain conditions. Can you tell me about that and take us through what it took for you to finish those matches? And ultimately, like, what helped you focus on being able to finish strong in those matches? Obviously, you were in a lot of pain.
That was in 2017 that I faced David.
17. Sorry.
Yeah. So in 2017, no, I totally wanted to go to the World Team Trials in 2017. 2016, I definitely didn't want to go. I didn't want to go to Olympic trials.
That's what it was. Yeah.
So, the Olympic trials. So at the time, I let's just say, like, my body just needed rest. I had some, I don't want to say necessarily they were injuries at the time, but I was just not in the greatest place physically. Mentally, I was fine. Like, that was the same year. Like I said, I was rebuilding myself, and I had rebuilt myself. I just accomplished my my goal, becoming a national champion once again. And so I didn't want to go at first. And I remember talking with Smith, and he's trying to convince me. I'm like, you know what, man, I just don't really want to. And he was like, no, you got to. You can do this. You can make 86. Like, you got this. We'll train you. Take like a couple weeks off, and then come back, and we'll train for it. And you can do this. And so I was like, all right, fine. So then that was when I believe the Olympic trials were on April 9th that year. I'm not completely sure on that, but I remember, and I always get this crud because people were saying, like, oh, because I said this in my interviews. I said that I only trained for 2 weeks for it, and I didn't really even want to be here. That's the flat out truth. I mean, you can believe it, you cannot. I'm not trying to impress you. That's just what happened. I didn't want to be there, and I trained for 2 weeks for it. And, I went out there and I just gave it my best. I still had the mindset that I had going through the whole year of, like, this is what I want to do. And this is what I want to be. And at that point, it changed from being the national champion to I want to be the best wrestler that I can be and push myself. And and I was put on a stage. It was more so like I just want to test myself against some of these great wrestlers. That bracket was amazing that year. You had Kyle Dake, you had me, you had David Taylor, you had Ed Ruth, you had Jake Herbert, you had Keith Gavin, you had Clayton Foster, you had even
Jeez.
Deron Wynn was there. I mean,
Yeah.
you had a lot of national titles, All Americans. I mean, at that point, it was just like, throw myself in the fire and let's see what's going to happen. And a lot of people thought I was going to get torched, and they had every reason / right to believe that. But but I showed up just like everybody else. I stepped on the scale like everybody else, and I was ready to go just like everybody else. And I put my best foot forward, and I wrestled my butt off, and happened to win, and that was that.
What do you feel like was your mental edge that weekend? What separated you? You were, like you said, in a stacked weight class, and you had only prepared for 2 weeks because that's just the way that you wanted to go about it. And what allowed you to be successful, especially mindset wise? Like, what allowed you to be successful that weekend? You wanted to be the best wrestler that you can be, but in the midst of all that competition and the things prior to, what separated you?
Well, I think that for me, it was I think a big thing was that I remember I used to, I'm not sure I used to, I still do it, but every before every match, I say a prayer, and it's a very short prayer, and it's the only thing it is me asking God to allow me to wrestle to the best of my ability, that you've blessed me with, and I think for me, like when I say that, it's almost kind of like I'm taking up an oath / badge, like I'm going to do whatever it is I need to do to be to get where I want to go, or get where I'm trying to be. And so, I mean, like that's kind of like my mindset going into these matches. Like I'm going to fight, scratch, rip through, do whatever it is I have to do to get where I'm going. And it's not like it's not as violent as I'm saying, making it sound. But it's more of like at peace kind of ordeal, because I really enjoy what I'm doing and I have fun with it. And then when you're having fun with something, it's not work. Um, it's not something that burdens you. And it's something that you're willing to go all out for. It's kind of like, I don't know, have you ever played like a pickup basketball with your game with your friends? And this game means nothing to the world. It means nothing. You guys are going to play this game. It means absolutely nothing. Yet you give your full on effort towards it because you're having
Absolutely.
fun. It's kind of like that. And I think that was the thing. I was just enjoying it. I was enjoying the challenge, the having to embrace, um, the walls that I had to punch through, the tough matches I had to do, the people that I was going against. I enjoyed the things people had to say before and after events, and which before saying I couldn't make the team, and then after saying I wouldn't medal. Like, I enjoy it. I push myself to surpass it, and really the having fun of it kind of it puts that stuff almost like in the back seat, because now it's just you go out there and you just do what you do, and you kind of just, I don't know, it's like floating almost, really.
I think that was a really good description. I think one of the things that I grabbed from that is talking about, when you're able to focus on the fun and the process, that, you kind of, it doesn't feel like work. I talked a lot about that in my gratitude podcast with Kyler. And, when you talk about when you're grateful for things, it's easier to have fun. There's less pressure. I make the remark all the time, guys, think of how everyone describes Penn State. What do these guys do? They're always having fun. They're so relaxed. Wrestling is like the fourth or fifth thing on their priority list. It's, God, family, friends, and then wrestling. Wrestling's something that they enjoy. And what people don't get, and the way that I feel like I'm able to relate it a little bit easier, is I was like, think about fishing. Let's say this group of kids really enjoys fishing. You can fish all day. You can ice fish all day, free. Catch nothing, but give it all that you've got and have no complaints if you come home empty-handed. Very few people could say the same about a wrestling tournament. Show up, cut weight, go 0-2, but go home being thankful for the opportunity that they got to wrestle. And I remind them, I say, okay, think about that. Now think about what happened to Mark Hall last year. how Mark Hall can lose in the NCAA finals, what he was working for all year. And then he goes 10 minutes later and he's the first one to jump in Bo Nickel's arms because he's so proud of his teammate. I think that takes that perspective where one, gratitude, and two, wrestling is something that's fun that they enjoy. So they don't have that feeling that, of failure. It's like, this sucks. I lost, but
right.
I'm so happy for my teammate.
Well,
So, I think that you put that well.
Letting something drive you and push you, and then letting something weigh you down. There's a huge difference between those two things. And really, I think that it's almost like failure is inevitable. Everyone is going to fail at some point in time in their life. Disappointment is your control, is what you have control of, right? Disappointment is lingering in that failure, and that's what's unhealthy. That's what can destroy your mindset. That's what can destroy I think some people, it's destroyed their careers. So failure is inevitable. You're going to fail at some point in time. You're not perfect, even though some people may want to believe that, but it's just not the case. So it's going to happen, but disappointment is lingering in that failure, and that's something that just cannot exist.
I think you guys that are listening, go listen to Jordan Burroughs when he lost in the Olympics. Go listen to Kyle Snyder this last time when he lost in the World Championships. Kyle, what does this loss mean to you? And he was like, nothing. It's just wrestling. Wrestling doesn't define me. I'm going to make some adjustments. It sucks to lose, but there was no regret. There was no, like you said, that lingering feeling was not there. It's like, I lost a wrestling match. Like, it's as if he lost his, he lost a possession of his. Like, no worries.
No,
I'll get another one. Like,
right,
there'll be many more.
I mean, obviously, and I hope people don't take this wrong. Like, it meant something to him, but it wasn't going to break him. It didn't change who he was. Right.
Who he was. Exactly.
Right.
Wrestling
His
doesn't
parents
define
are still going to love him. We're still going to love him. Everything's. He's still one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. Like, it's not something that's going to define him. Like you said, it's not going to change anything about who he is as a person, how he carries himself.
I find that comes very natural to wrestlers that are deep in their faith. You hear Jordan, Kyle, Helen, guys like you hear those things. Even Jack Mueller, after he lost in the NCAAs last year, I ran into him at B-Dubs, and I was talking to him. I was like, hey man, I hope you don't take, your what happened this weekend too hard. He's like, nah, not at all. He's like, I was upset, of course, but it's wrestling doesn't define me. And I think what Jordan said when he lost the Olympics was so true. And I hope people listen to it, or if they haven't listened to it again, he's like, I'm going to go home. He's like, I got a God that loves me. I have a wife that loves me. I have kids that love me. He's like, I'm upset that I lost, and I feel, of course I wanted to win, but I have so many things to be grateful for. And, this isn't going to hold me back. And I hope if more people were able to take that approach, we would have, I feel like, not just a lot more success in our life, but people would be happier. And again, people ask, well, what if I'm not, what if faith isn't my thing? Well, you don't have to be. This is going to come, and I'm going to give Kyler, I'm going to give you credit. It's not about just faith. Your focus has to be on something, like your primary priority has to be on something that's an absolute truth. It's
right.
Unchanging. And faith is probably the strongest example. But, if you're centered around wrestling, well, wrestling has highs and lows and is often outcome driven, versus God and family and friendship and love. Those things are absolute truths.
Well, I mean, wrestling is a sport, I believe, that's built for a Christian outlook. I really do believe that. And here's why. It's because you put so much time and effort and so much grind and there's so much you go through as a wrestler, and then you go out and you perform and you may win the world title or national title, state title, whatever it is. You go out there and win this for very little recognition of it. So you do all this for little recognition, but in that, you're not, the glory isn't for you, it's for the one you serve. So it's kind of like almost, the sport is almost set up to then glorify God. And so, I mean, I truly believe like it is set up for you to succeed in the manner of remembering, who blessed you with these opportunities, these talents, your mindset, your love for what you do, with what you have around you. So I think that's an awesome thing about the sport. And I think when you talk about faith, it's funny because for me, the two biggest things for me, especially, are fun and faith. Fun because it frees you. It makes you free in whatever you're doing. There's no change, no chains, no weight, no nothing. You're just completely out there. Also, like I said, it's like you're floating and you're just enjoying it. Faith because when things do get hard and get grindy, as Kevin Jackson likes to say, things get sticky. When things get hard and you have to push yourself to a level that you may not have yet touched and or reached, faith is the thing that relieves you and frees you of the fear to do that.
Faith is the bridge.
And so it almost lights the path. It almost helps you walk the path where there is no light because you've never been there before. All right.
Oh, that sounds good. I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
I like the sound of that a lot. Guys, I want you all to think about this right now. When he's talking about, the importance of how faith relates to wrestling, and how wrestling is a sport that's built, for a Christian athlete and glorifying God. What's your purpose? Like, why do you wrestle? Is it, is your purpose outcome driven, or is it based on an absolute truth? Is it something do you wrestle to glorify God, to make the best version of yourself? Or, do you wrestle for things that, are not absolute truths, that are conditional? And if you can figure out what's your purpose, what's your why, that's where, whether it be your Christian faith, or whether it be your faith in general, whether it be just something that is not conditional, that's where in difficult times you can remember that purpose, and that'll be that light that guides you. So that was a really eloquent way to say that. I like that a lot.